For our French macaron class, we're going to need a few things, and I want to step you through those. You will need a kitchen scale, and that is so that you can weigh out all of your ingredients. You're also going to need a rubber spatula for mixing. You're going to need some baking trays. And as far as your baking trays go, you really want a tray that is nice and flat. You may want to just designate 2 trays to macaron baking if this is something that you're going to want to do on a regular basis. And the reason being is that sometimes our pans can warp. So here's a professional pan that I've had for some time, and it actually, if I lay it down flat, it actually is a little bit warped in the center. So what happens is as your macarons bake up, if your pan is sort of bowed in the middle, you'll get uneven feet when your macarons rise. So, just designate a nice heavy duty, real nice sturdy heavy duty baking sheet that is not bowed, it's nice and flat, to your macaron baking. The next thing that you're going to need will be the templates. So I've included on our class page the macaron template, and you can simply put a piece of parchment over it and replicate those circles. The easiest way to do that is to use a biscuit cutter and just line it up and then draw through the center. If your biscuit cutter is a little bit bigger, that's not a big deal. The main thing is that you just want these spaced out so that when you pipe, you get more even spaced, more rounded macarons. You could also print off 4 copies of this and then just lay them under when we go to pipe. And then after they've set up, just kind of sneak in here and pull it out. So those are the 2 options for that. Some other things that you will need are some scissors. You will also need a number 12 tip or any rounded tip. I like the number 12 tip because you can control the flow when you're piping your macarons onto your templates. You will also need some piping bags. You're gonna want large, at least 16-inch size disposable or cloth piping bags for this. 18 inches is fine. 12 is too small, so definitely want at least 16 inches. Otherwise, you're going to have to make up 2 bags, which will slow your process down. Once you get your macaron batter pulled together, you really want to get going on piping them. So having 1 large bag is great for that. Some other things that you're going to need is a food processor or food prep. So I'm just going to be using my Ninja. You could use a full-blown regular food processor as well. You will also need a mixer. So I have my Artisan KitchenAid here. And you want to make sure this is really clean. So make sure you get up in here and just really clean all of this out so there's no opportunity for particulates to fall into your meringue when we go to make our meringue. We're going to be using a whisk attachment, and you're going to want some distilled white vinegar. I highly recommend that you give your whisk here a good wipe down with the distilled vinegar and your bowl. It will evaporate. It's not going to add any odor or anything like that to the baking process. So just wipe it down. Sometimes little bits of particulates can stick to the sides of our bowls and get stuck in the tines of the whisk, even though it's gone through a really hot dishwasher. So it's always good just to wipe everything down to make sure that there are no fats hiding in there, because that will cause your meringue to not fluff up. You're going to need egg whites, and you need to crack them. So it needs to be freshly cracked egg whites. With that said, I want to also let you know that these should sit in the refrigerator overnight. So crack them the night before, let them sit in the fridge overnight. This kind of helps age them. This is the way that I do mine. It isn't necessarily necessary, if that's even a thing, to do that, because obviously when the eggs are from the chicken and go to the supermarket and all of that, they've obviously been aged because they've been sitting on the shelves. However, this is the way that I do it, so I don't want to tempt fate because macarons are very finicky. So I always just crack my egg whites the night before and leave them in the fridge. You also want these to be at room temperature. That's super important. So make sure that they are at room temperature when it is time to bake. A few other things that you are going to need. You're going to need some granulated sugar, some super fine almond flour, powdered sugar, and cream of tartar. So cream of tartar is our stabilizer. It also helps leaven the meringue, helps whip it up. So you want to make sure it's not that much. It's only 1/8 of a teaspoon, but it is an important thing, just like aging the egg whites. Some fine granulated sugar, and then our almond meal. So this is just simply super fine blanched almonds. I prefer the Bob's Red Mill brand, super fine almond flour. There's nothing else added to it, so you're gonna want that. You're also gonna want powdered sugar, and I did want to just take a second to talk about powdered sugar. Powdered sugar can be a little bit finicky also in our French macarons. So why? Because if you're buying a store brand of powdered sugar, like for example, this one is Kroger, and it is just, you know, a brand, store brand. All powdered sugar has cornstarch in it, and for French macarons, it does help to have that cornstarch in there. However, cornstarch isn't regulated, so the reason why the store brands tend to be cheaper is because they have more cornstarch in them, and they don't have to disclose on the front or the back how much cornstarch is in there. The one thing that is good to look for is the 10X. That means it's been sifted 10 times, so it tends to have less clumps. But just be aware that if you do buy a store brand of confectioner's sugar, there's probably going to be more cornstarch, and it could affect the outcome of your French macarons in terms of that foot and rising. This is a great place to spend a little bit more money by the C&H brand or the Domino brand, because it does contain less of that cornstarch, about 3%. Here is a brand here. This is by India Tree. They're out of Seattle, Washington. And this is powdered cane sugar, but they actually disclose on the back how much cornstarch is in it, which is 3.22%. So this is great. It is $10 though for 12 ounces, so it's extremely expensive. I will leave that up to you, but just know that if you do have some issues with your macarons, you know, forming those feet, you might want to take a look at your powdered sugar and switch around with that, play with different brands, and hopefully that will help you. In my previous video, I talked a lot about the equipment that you'll need and some of our basic ingredients for our base recipe. We will be elaborating on that base recipe. We will be making chocolate macarons. So I just wanted to touch really quickly on two things with regards to the macaron recipe. You do want some Dutch cocoa powder. This is unsweetened. I'm just using an organic one. You could use Hershey's brand as well, or any of the other ones that are out on the market. You just want to make sure that it's a Dutch cocoa powder. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention with regards to the French macarons and the baking process, we talked a lot about the baking sheets. I wanted to mention that your oven temperature can very, very greatly differ in temperature based on a number of factors. What your dial says is not always what the inside temperature is. I highly recommend that you get an inexpensive oven thermometer and just test the temperature to see what the actual temperature is in the inside of your oven, because that's going to affect your bake time. So if your oven's too hot, it's going to cause them to cook too quickly. If it's too not hot enough, then it's going to take longer. So knowing what your internal temperature is really important so that you can adjust accordingly. Do yourself a favor and get an inexpensive oven thermometer so you can see what that temperature is. All right, that's that for our base recipe. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that we will be making a white chocolate ganache to go inside of these delicious chocolate macarons. And for that recipe, you are going to need white chocolate. These are Ghirardelli white chocolate chips. Totally fine to use. You could also get the Lindt solid white chocolate bars and chop that up if you wanted to go that route. It's going to be a little more expensive than just using a Ghirardelli. You're also going to need a microwave safe bowl. If you don't have a microwave, you can heat the cream, which is what we're going to put in here when we make our white chocolate raspberry ganache. So if you don't have a microwave, you'll just need to set your stovetop up with a pot with some water and like a glass bowl to sit on top so you can create a double boiler situation. The other thing that you will need are freeze-dried raspberries. These I get from Trader Joe's. You could certainly also order them online from a place like Amazon. But what you want to do, I just wanted to show you, you want to take your freeze-dried raspberries and you want to stick them either in like a spice grinder. I have a Ninja that came with little cups for doing smoothies. So I just dump all my raspberries, my freeze-dried raspberries, right into that smoothie blender. It's a cup blender. And then I just pulverize it. And then I take a small mesh sieve. This is a very small mesh sieve. And then I just went through and I sifted into another bowl to sift out as much of the seeds as I could so that I get a powder. If you like seeds, you certainly can leave them in and just pulverize your berries and call it good. I don't like seeds in my I just don't like seeds in my preserves, my ganache, any of those things. So I tend to be a little more particular. So I just take and sift them out. It's not a perfect sift because you will have a few little pieces here and there. But that's all I did is I just took my Ninja blender that came with cups, threw these in there, blended them down, and then I just took this little sieve and sifted out those seeds. Okay. Like I said, you could also use a spice grinder as long as it's cleaned really well, because obviously you don't want spices. I do have one of those that have cups that come out. However, I just find that the cups, it's kind of like a NutriBullet or one of those types, this little cup situation. I just find that it's so much easier just to dump these in here. This is strong enough to bust up and turn the raspberries into powder, and then just sift it out, and then I can just wash this and be done with it. The one thing that I find a bit of a challenge with the spice grinders is because this turns to a powder, it tends to kind of go up inside the lid of the spice grinder, and it just kind of gets all over everything. So do yourself a favor and use something like this. If you don't have any of those options, then just put them in a Ziploc bag and just smash them. They're very pliable, so they bust up pretty easily. You're not going to get a fine powder like this, but you can at least bust them up, then stick them in your sifter and kind of push down to kind of create like a grating action to get it to be a little bit more of a dust. The particulates won't be as fine as this if you do it that way, but it will certainly be just fine for making raspberry white chocolate ganache. I did blend up this entire bag. This comes to about 0.8 ounces, so not quite 1 ounce. And I like to do it this way because then I can just spoon in and give a little taste and decide like how much raspberry do I want in according to my palate. That is it for our equipment and our ingredients. If you have any questions, please send an email